Dr. Rii has completed her bachelor's at UCLA, came and did her doctorate at the University of Hawaii in oceanography, and is now going to tell you a little bit about her position. She's being nominated as NREM Cooperating Graduate Faculty, which is exciting. As part of what initiated this, as far as for today, is that she's going to be serving as a PhD committee member for one of our students, and we would love to recognize that with her role as cooperating faculty. But more broadly, she supports research and directs research at the ʻAʻina National Estuarine Research Reserve, where many of our students do research projects, faculty have research projects, and so she's been involved in our department for a long time, and so this is a way of formalizing and recognizing that relationship. So her talk today will not only talk about the research that she's helping to oversee, but also talk a little bit about her involvement in the department because of this nomination. So with that, it's my pleasure to welcome you here today.
Thank you. Okay. Can you guys all hear me if I just stand here? This is like a short person thing where everything seems really high. So as long as you can see me, it's all good. Okay, so aloha mai kako, I'm Shimi. Thank you, Melissa, for that introduction. And I'm gonna just get right into it. So today I'm gonna be talking about, let's see, is it moving? No. So a little bit about me. I want to introduce myself to this department. Who am I? How did I get to be in this position today? My current and hopefully maybe future involvement with NREM, and then some highlights of our current work in ʻAʻina. Okay, so I'm going to take you on a little journey. So here I am, a little girl, and I'm actually in Japan. I was born to Taiwanese parents, and I always felt a little bit like an outsider in most of my life, just because I grew up speaking in Japanese and understanding Taiwanese, and the outside world was speaking a different language than my home. But then at a very young age, by the time I was 7, I moved here to Hawaii. And here I am. I actually claim Manana as my home. I went to Palisades Elementary School, and Ewa Moku is my home. So I grew up in Waipio and Waikele. I'm just really connected to the moku on Ewa Moku on that side. This was my claim to fame. I didn't intend to be a marine biologist, but when I was in 3rd grade, I won 1st place looking at dolphin food web dynamics. And I love that field trip. We went to a field trip to, I think, Baby Makapu'u. We can't do that anymore in elementary school anymore, but we looked at like Spanish Dancer, and it was like the best field trip of my life. But here I am holding a blue ribbon, and I was like super proud. And then as I grew older, I was an avid paddler. I paddled for Lokahi Canoe Club. I surfed, I dived, I did all those fun things. But now, I'm a mom to these 2. They're bigger now. They're 8-year-old twins. And that takes up a lot of my time, in addition to spending a lot of my time in ʻAʻina. So another reason that I think what really, thinking about like what brought me here is like thinking about like how things in my childhood or life influenced the way I think. And I had these things lying around my house. Anybody know what that is on the side? Do you guys know what that is? No idea. Oh my God. It's actually ginseng in a bottle. And in our house, we had like millions, and we had like ginseng that was like this big and bottles everywhere. And it was just normal. And do you guys know what that is in the case? It's acupuncture needles. So nowadays, if you go to acupuncture, then they bring out the like super sterile, like disposable needles. But no, we had these things with like cloth and super kind of sketchy looking now. But I helped clean those acupuncture needles all the time. So my parents were Western medicine doctors, but they actually went and got trained in traditional Chinese medicine. And my mom actually learned a lot of this from her mom. And it was just second nature that, this was around my house. Like I never thought of something as Western medicine or Eastern medicine. It was just blending the two together for healing purposes. And even now, as I have kids and I'm like, okay, this is when you use certain things, I don't even think about it being something like, like I'm sure La'alapa'au is the same way, where it's just part of your culture, part of the way you do things. But I didn't think of it. So it's really difficult when you start realizing that the way you grew up and the blending of different knowledge systems is not the norm in normal society. And then also, I just wanted to introduce, when you go to a place, a cultural place, you introduce and you say your name, where you're from. So my full legal name is Yoshimi Rii Claiborne. Claiborne's my married name. But a lot of times people think I'm Japanese just because of my first name. And Rii, people are like, what is Rii? They think it's Korean, they think it's many, many things, but it's actually a very unusual name, which is actually a very common name because it's actually a Japanese version of an English version, or it's an English version of a Japanese version of Lee, which is plum tree. And my name, Yoshimi, actually means Shukwan, which means light of the world, which I think is like very kismet because when I think light of the world, I think sun. And then I ended up studying phytoplankton. So, I didn't intend to study phytoplankton, but that's kind of where my life led me. So, my academic interests in a nutshell, I studied marine biology and crabs and ecology in undergrad, but I did a lot of work. These are actually pelagophytes, picoeukaryotes. I took that image under a microscope. They're very, very, very tiny. If a piece of hair is about 185 micrometers, then these guys, actually the diameter is less than 2 microns in size. So it's very, very tiny. I spent a lot of my graduate career looking under microscopes. This was me actually on a boat looking under a microscope. So I got really good at it. And then now this is at Heia Fish Pond, and we go and collect water quality, nutrients, DNA, and et cetera, to look at phytoplankton and other organisms and how they're interacting with the environment. This is one of my students I'm on a committee for, Nalani Olgan. We're collecting sediment cores in Heia Fish Pond. And then, of course, service and laulima is a major part of our lives in He'eia. So to think about, I guess I want to put research in quotes because, research is not just how you think about academic research, right? So it's like my current research focus would be, my background, I'm trained in oceanography and marine ecology. So I'm always interested in how organisms are shaped by their environment and vice versa. I want to ask community-driven questions. I'm passionate about science for societal good, for sustaining productivity, and reciprocal relationships. That's what we're here to talk about. This is how we want to do things in He'eia, and hopefully it spreads, and this is how we're doing things everywhere. Reciprocity and giving at the center of all activities, right? And then finally, I study biodiversity and deciphering this richness, right? Biodiversity, and not just in species, but obtained by the diversity of understanding and positionality. So, I think now that I have kids, I think a lot about preserving this knowledge from loss because my culture is very tied to Taiwanese, but I can't really speak that language. I understand the nuances. I understand what my parents are saying, but I can't speak and try to transfer that knowledge. So I think a lot about how do you preserve this knowledge? How do you preserve the nuances and the knowledge that's immersed in that language if you're going to lose it, right? So that kind of drives, those are my motivations. Like Melissa said, this is just my really short academic CV. I went to UCLA for my undergrad. I did a double major in marine bio and English. I did my graduate studies in oceanography here in SOWEST, and then I did a postdoc at HIMB under a Smithsonian fellowship, looking at nearshore dynamics and STEM education. But it's really what the kind of things I did between my education that really shaped who I am and drove me to be where I'm at right now. So after I finished my bachelor's, I took a couple years off before I entered graduate school, and I worked in the Hawaii Ocean Time Series program. I went out to sea, and that's kind of how I made the segue from studying crabs into studying phytoplankton and spending a lot of time out at sea. It really shaped my ecology of how nutrients and currents and, in open ocean, it wasn't tides, but really these physical, biological, and chemical factors influence organisms and where they are. Between my master's and PhD, I was really adamant against going for my PhD. I was like, I'm going to get my master's, I'm going to be in the workforce, and then I'm going to be good. And then, so I worked for 3 years actually in a biotech company looking at biofuels in OTEC in Big Island. And then I decided to come back and join the PhD. And then, so when I actually did come back for my PhD program, I did a lot of other things for professional development. And I was really passionate about writing. So I did a little stint writing for Nature Careers. I started the Science Communicators Ohana with a couple of my friends. And then I got really, really involved in the research experiences in marine science at HIMB with Malia Rivera, because I'm really passionate about bringing these opportunities, especially to local and ʻāina and Pacific Islander kids. Okay, so NREM cooperating graduate faculty, like Melissa said, why join? I'd like to serve on master's and PhD committees to advise students, not just conducting work in He'eia, but pertaining to my research focus. I know that NREM is really focused on resource management, and it's a really well-rounded place. I look, there's so many researchers with a wide breadth of expertise, and I think it would be a really cool place to join and exchange knowledge. Who will I work with? I have some I'd like to continue existing collaborations that I'll talk about on the next slide, as well as, new collaborations, hopefully. And then some of the exciting future opportunities, I don't know what it's called, but there's new classes, an expansion pack of one of the classes that I've been teaching in marine biology, and then co-mentor students. So current projects with NREM, I've been working with Melissa on several students, and currently I'm working with Claire Atkins. I think she's online. Hey, Claire. And looking at shorebird foraging niche dynamics with Paipaio He'eia and He'eia. And then also Rachel. Hi, Rachel. So we've been looking at a lot of factors of volunteerism or service opportunities and how that shapes student learning or student identity and engagement with cultural ecosystem services. Louis, who works with Kirsten on ecosystem accounting of goods and services in He'eia, specifically impact of biocultural restoration. And then Sarah Wu, who works with Rachel and Mihana and Kavika, looking at these diverse perspectives of reef health towards stewardship in Kaneohe Bay. And then, I'm open to all these future involvements, but, I think first and foremost, I've been a co-instructor for MBio 600, which is the Kulananoi'i Introduction to Place-Based Methodologies in Hawaii. And it's a marine biology graduate program course that all incoming students must take. And I know that we are doing expansion packs to different departments. Rachel, are you instructing? You're the lead instructor, co-instructing. So I think, contribute to what we can offer, how that adapts. Serve on committees with mutual interest. I don't know if Yinfeng is on the committee, but we've been talking about stream eDNA forever and matching that with watershed hydrology. And one of the things that He'eia NER really does, our core team, we think about what is needed by the community, and we host like seminars and workshops. And I think it would be really cool to have jointly led panels related to issues that are really important. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to get into He'eia NER. I think most of you guys know what He'eia NER is, but I'm going to just do a brief overview. So our vision, and I'm sorry for the ʻōkina for this font. I like the font, but it creates the space. So just be patient when you see it on there. But basically the vision for He'eia NER is this ahupua'a concept. We want to see this thriving and resilient socio-ecological community. We want to restore to a state of abundance, ʻāina Momona, and leave it and to sustain it for future generations. And I put these pictures on purpose because this is ama, the striped mullet, and kalo. And, in both these situations in the landscape that we work in, both these species, really relate to us, that sustaining the abundance of these organisms means ʻāina Momona to us. So everything that we do is guided by the kupuna of this land, of those that are shown here, of those that these people embody. And so this is actually our reserve advisory board. We are having a RAB meeting tomorrow. We go over our activities and we get guidance about which direction that we go. And this is very unique, actually, to a National Estuarine Research Reserve, a federal entity, to have kupuna guidance on our activities. And that's because we are actually one of 30 We're the 29th site that was designated in 2017, and we're a federal state partnership with NOAA, and our state entity is University of Hawaii at Manoa, which is Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology, and you can see the partners down there. And then just briefly, we can see the yellow boundary is our He'eia boundaries, but we operate within the pink line, which is the He'eia Ahupua'a. And you can see that there are many entities here, the Paipaio He'eia that stewards the fish pond, Kako'iwi that stewards the wetland, DLNR, with the marine waters, and HIMB in white. But really, I want to come back to this concept of ʻāina Momona and sustaining abundance. And I love this picture because these are our grad students in multiple departments that's getting in to the land, getting their hands and feet dirty and enjoying being together. And it's really about sustaining. So without the people there, then without the hands, you wouldn't be sustaining this resource abundance, right? And much of what we do is looking at the foundations. So what we see here is not just kalo, but it's vai, it's wai, it's water, it's the auwai that we see, all of those things. It's creating habitat, all the different ecosystem services. And really what we're hoping to do is restore this ahupua'a function, restore the flow of water from the mountains to better understand lo'ikalo, the wetlands, carbon sequestration, to investigate drivers of local ia or fish pond productivity, and then promote resilience in the reefs. And with this 1928 picture as kind of like this beacon of hope of like what, not to restore it to exactly this, but to restore it to the abundance that we see in this picture. And how we really do this is what makes us unique, I think, is we try to promote this use of reciprocal research protocols. So when researchers come, we really try to promote how we want research to be done. And these 4 tenets that's outlined in this paper here is really prioritizing the needs of the community. You know, it's like really like common sense, right? Like you want to build relationship first, you want to co-produce new knowledge together, and you want to scale it up. So it's not just doing place-based research, but making sure that it's globally applicable or globally sustainable, creating sustainable solutions. But this is not that easy because there's always timetables that mismatch with the researchers or the communities. And so what we do in He'eia, and part of my job as research coordinator, is to engage and facilitate these iterative process for requesting research. And a big part of what we're moving towards now too, now that we're establishing these protocols, is to reposition university research to support these Indigenous community-driven goals. So there's these 4 goals, but you know, how do we actually make sure that the people who are involved have proper and equitable attribution? They have agency, so they actually have a choice in how they want to steward their own data. And, you know, how do you value reciprocity? So if you engage and go to services, or if we provide participation fees, like how do you actually formalize this process and value it in a way that is part of the process when an RFP comes out, or et cetera. So one of the things that we have done recently is to create this authorship and acknowledgement policy. It's a technical report. And we iterate in here that all research and activities conducted in He'eia in partnership with our partners engage with Indigenous data. And our goal is really not to do this top down, you have to include certain people or exclude, but it's this embody the spirit of aloha, you know, respect, inclusion, equity, and really create the space for these conversations to make sure to have these conversations before the paper is written or the product is created and throughout the process. Okay, so I'm going to go into some NER projects, but Melissa, I know we started late. Do you know how much time? Okay, so about 30 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to highlight 2.5 projects, etc. But I'm not going to go into like super sciencey stuff. I'm going to kind of talk about what went well and what did we learn. And I'll go through it so that maybe we can have some discussion. I know you guys are students. Many of you guys are first years, I guess. So you might have some questions about how do we actually implement some of the things that I said. Okay, so this is actually a net, a koko that's part of our logo, and we thought very deeply about ʻēina. Like, what are we? How do we actually exist? And we thought about our positionality. And so I want to challenge you guys to think about your positionality as you embark on your research, right? This is actually typically made from one length of rope that's weaved together with 4 strands, and it carries like an umeke holding food or water. So, our role, how we view it is that we facilitate, we carry things, we elevate others, the folks that are working, the knowledge that needs to be stewarded, the data. So when I talk about these projects, so first is going to be this flagship water quality program, or the collaborative project examining all things Hawaii, and then a very kia'i-driven, community-driven project. I want you guys to think about positionality. How are we coming into each project, and how do we achieve the project in a way that is equitable and in a pono way? Okay, so the system-wide monitoring program, or SWAMP, NOAA really loves acronyms, so that's one of their acronyms. And so the system-wide monitoring program is a flagship program of the NERS system. So all 30 reserves actually conduct this. So when we were designated, they said, here's all your stuff, build this system-wide monitoring program in ʻēia. So we had a lot of sensors and all sorts of towers and stuff lying around. And we were tasked with building 4 water quality stations, 1 weather station, and establish methods for vegetation and elevation monitoring. So we use all standardized equipment. There's data management with extensive QA/QC procedures. You can go to this website and actually download most of the data. You can download anybody's data. And many of the infrastructure, so this infrastructure right here is from, I think, from South Carolina. And as you can see, it's very bulky. Like, imagine something like that in Hawaii, right? But the system-wide monitoring program is really cool. So in places like this is Guana Tolomado Matanzas in Florida, we get to see 20 years of chlorophyll A concentrations. And this is a synthesis of how chlorophyll A has actually anomalies. So they increased. So from 2000, in the past 20 years, they've been increasing. So, in Hawaii, we've amassed maybe about, we installed our first one in 2019. So we have about 7 years of data. But, so we can look at some of the things. We're probably still in the decadal changes, but it's really cool that as a system, we've unmasked all this data. And so that's kind of where we're headed. So we were designated in 2017. A bunch of us came on in 2018, and we started building this system in 2019. And we did it. We built it. But it took us, as you can see, we built our first station at Waima'ama. This is in He'eia Stream in 2019. The next one on a patch reef in 2020. Another one right outside of one of the sluice gates at He'eia Fish Pond in 2020. Weather station in 2021, and one is co-located at a USGS stream gauge in 2022. So it took roughly 3-4 years. All of these were from the locations to the building, to the installation, to the usage, to the application, all of it was co-developed with our co-management partners. And a lot of it was, many of us, Gus, our senior research technician, and I, hauling the stuff to go to show it to them and say, hey, this is what the solar panel looks like. It's this big. This is what this, antenna for satellite looks like. This is what the thing is going to look like. Is it going to interfere with biocultural restoration? Do you think this is a safe place? How do you think this place is going to change in the next 2 months, because we're like actively undergoing biocultural restoration? Where do we see the landscape going in 50 years? We're going to leave this to be sustaining and collecting really good data way beyond us. It's going to live beyond us. So how do we actually build this thing within this cultural landscape? So a lot of it was lots and lots of building relationship and trying to think about it together. And as you can see in these pictures, we worked on it together. It was really fun, and really set up the tone of how we wanted to do research in He'eia. So there's Claire. She actually worked with us partially as a technician between her bachelor's and her master's. And these are some of our technicians. And then together with Kim Falinsky at the Nature Conservancy, some of our water quality measurements, in addition to those sensors, we are starting to get really cool data. So we can, get information such as nutrients. These are inorganic nutrients throughout the ahupua'a, going from Mauka to Makai. We can look at wet, dry season dynamics of nutrients. We can look at nutrient limitation dynamics. And I'm not going to go into these figures too much today at all, but please contact me if you're really interested. You can also download a lot of this data openly from that website. And then, so we're doing this like, we spend a lot of investment of our time in maintaining this system. So this past fall, my postdoc at that time and I co-taught this course, MBio 740, to look at time series analysis using swamp data across the nerve system. Part of it was really like we spent a lot of time collecting the data and we want to build capacity to analyze the data. But we didn't want just anybody to analyze the data. We wanted people to engage with the reserve management, reserve partners, look at what the reserve management questions are. So in this class, we actually had the students work on a collaborative project charter. We standardized analyses. We had them engage with reserves. And this is actually one of the examples of two students who used breakpoint analysis to look at regime shifts during marine heat waves in Alaska and Kachemak Bay Nar. So it was really, really cool. So this is kind of the direction that we're heading in as we get into collecting the data, like how do we actually apply the data and how do we make it useful? Okay, so with this system-wide monitoring program, I kind of wanted to go over what was sweet and salty, right? What went really well and what could have been improved. With like lihimui, salty is good. So, we can just, kind of, nothing is really bad. But sweet is, we installed a set of sensors that are useful and part of the cultural landscape. And it took a while and we're still maintaining it. And it's not really like you always maintain your relationship. So it's not like we did it and we're done, So as long as those are there, we're still maintaining the sensors, the relationship, the land, everything, right? We took the time needed to ensure that the installation was conducted in a Pono manner. And positionality. I think, if we came in and we're like, you know what, the funding is telling us we got to build this like right now, or we have to build this yesterday. And then we're like, we're just going to build it right here. They would be like, what? No, So we thought together on how they'll benefit the future, how they'll benefit them, how they'll benefit the entire ahupua'a. And I think that was the positionality that we actively took to embark on this project. Salty, the pressures of, these should have been installed last year. That's going to happen in science. We're going to have grants that have grant deadlines. You have monies associated with certain things and say, okay, this should have been closed out, and I think those are the kind of things that like in our first few years we were dealing with how much to say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And how are we going to creatively make sure that we're doing it in community timelines? Imagining how to plan for 50 years from now or any future, because when we first started, mangroves were being actively removed. We would go there a week later, the landscape looked completely different. A storm would come through, the muliwai would look completely different, So it was like really difficult trying to picture where to put things so that it would be beneficial or that it didn't just get washed away. So I think that was difficult, not necessarily salty. Okay. Second example, we're going to go into this really cool project that, I think all of us are really proud of that we're wrapping up right now. This is a grant that was funded by opportunity that's available to the nerve system called Science Collaborative. And it's called Wetland, Water, and Ike, and the acronym because, yes, we're NOAA. So it's by improving understanding of hydrology to inform management decision. And this project really came out of as soon as the mangroves started coming down, we had these participatory meetings and strategizing monitoring. And many of the stewards said, we want to know everything about the water that's coming through the watershed. We want to know what's in it, how fast it's flowing. Is it actually going under? Do we have punawai systems? Groundwater, what's in the punawai? Where is it popping up? Those kind of questions. So this grant that I served as a PI on, and we had Veronica, who was our postdoc, Veronica Gibson, Henrietta Dulai, she's an earth scientist, and Kim Felinsky, and many others, of course, we were all involved. But we co-developed these objectives and questions with our stewards. And, many of it was really about measuring surface and groundwater flow using different geochemical tracers. But this grant was really cool because we were able to add these other things as part of the grant, such as increasing our collective understanding of VAI through culture, science, and policy lenses, or aggregating data streams together, or creating educational curriculum. And it really reflected the history of VAI activism for water protections in He'eia. And so we worked with all of these partners. And as you notice, it's many of the partners are those that are in He'eia, but we also had entities such as the Commission on Water Resource Management, or USGS, and Board of Water Supply. And I'm not going to go into this for sake of time, but we have recent water policy for He'eia, which mirrors a lot of the water challenges that we have on our island, with Seaworm developing a proposed new interim in-stream flow standard. And so with many of these guys, we asked them, like, hey, can we actually co-develop and co-design the study for this grant so that we can contribute to this ongoing effort? So for this grant, to answer those objectives, we did lots of cool science. We did water quality sampling, groundwater, flow rates, radon, and then we learned a lot of stuff, right? So we had nitrogen, phosphorus, silica fluxes. We found out ages of groundwater that went through the wetland versus ages of water that was like up on the Mauka areas, and close to headwaters. We looked at amount of groundwater contribution in streams. It went up as much as 50% of groundwater contribution in streams, and elevation origin of water, which actually told us that there was local recharge of water going on. So we could tell that Ahupua are connected. We looked at submarine groundwater discharge and tidal dynamics and extreme events, and gains and losses in the wetland. So how much water is actually coming through into Kako'oiwi and how much was leaving. We also did workshops in Huaka'i. So we had these perspectives of water. We had kupuna, we had kumuhula, we had an earth justice attorney and a USGS scientist, and we got them all together to talk about different perspectives on VAI. We had Kolaupoko educators. We brought together DOE educators as well as ʻāina educators and talked about educational resources. And then the best part was we went sampling together with the stewards. We went up to the Haiku Tunnel and many other places, Iolaka'a, and et cetera. But the best part, by hands down, was Hui Vai. So Hui Vai was a project advisory group that was written into the grant that we created. And these are the faces of many of them, not all. And we had quarterly advisory team meetings. We had iterative review. This is something like you write in your grant, but it's like, oh, it's hard to get people together, and we do it, but we actually would be like, okay, so this is not super final. And then the next time we'll say, actually, that those numbers are completely wrong. But we weren't scared to show dirty data. We had monthly Laulima days and service activities where we continued the conversation. We had these site access and partner fees to supplement, their participation and to make sure that the work that they're doing is supported. And we talked about authorship and attribution. And then for the data set that we just submitted to NOAA, we put metadata codes that said that future use of this data must get permission from these entities, these community stewards. So this project, Sweet and Salty, we collected an amazing data set through collaboration. And it was like really, really lots of work, but everyone was invested, which was the best part. Hui Vai, hands down. I mean, people are like still like, when are we getting together? And we've, it's like we ride that momentum and it turns into something else, and new partners are established. We really deepened our connection with USGS through this and many others. And our positionality with this was, again, let's generate new knowledge together. There were some, politics involved and et cetera, agency, dynamics, but we said, let's invest in learning with each other. And I think that was a really good positionality that we're still trying to maintain. And then Salty, grant is POW, so it's kind of sad, but on to next steps with the in-stream flow standards and the landscape is changing, our motives, our objectives are changing, so we're moving forward. And finding out that we really do need more why. And, we need more data, but that is apparent, is that, there is white underground and there is white in the stream, and we need that, So I think that was the sweet and salty. Okay, so the third thing is going to be really short, but I just wanted to get into, so I talked about the first one. Swamp is really this kind of something that we do regularly, no matter what, with ʻāina. The second thing is a specific question that we embarked on because the community asked for it. And there's other questions that are very place-based. And I wanted to highlight two of my grad students, Lenny Musselman and Kyle Bosworth, that I co-advised with Rosie Allegado in oceanography and in Sea Grant. And we worked very, very closely with Paipaio He'eia stewards. So this is Keahi Piohia and Hi'ile Cavello. And they had specific questions at He'eia Fish Pond that we wrote into grants or we devised a study around. So this is Kyle's project. Really it was like from the get-go, Hi'ile and everybody at He'eia Fish Pond want to increase production of the striped mullet, the ama. And so like, how do we give them the food that we want? What is the food found in their stomachs? And so this project leveraged a lot of things. And one of the unique things that we did is that we didn't collect big ama for the sake of science. We made sure we actually wrote into the grant that when the kia'i harvested fish for their allotment from once a month, then we would actually have them dissect the stomachs and we would use that stomach. So it wasn't like, hey, we're going to come in with this project and we're going to collect 12 stomachs and, and the rest of the fish you can do whatever you want with, So it was like we did opportunistic sampling. This is actually a picture of striped mullet and kanda. And so you can see that at this juvenile stage, the kanda mullet, which never gets much bigger than this, is a direct competitor with juvenile mullet. And this is actually a puck, a really cool puck. This is what the stomach looks like inside of a more grown ama. And this sediment right here is what they actually filter out. And then that's where their diet, their food and prey items are held. So this figure, this is actually like fresh off the press. He made the figures yesterday, but we did some meta barcoding on the diet and we're figuring out that yes, the mature ama diet is off clusters on the side, but the kanda and the juvenile ama has species that they are competing directly for. So and then linking to this is like, what is actually this? And there's, specific types of diatoms that matches some of the work that was done in the past. And Lenny's study looked at actually what phytoplankton are in the pond and how do they grow when they're given certain nutrients. And in addition to that, Keahi, listening to some of our studies said, oh, so if the pond is, limited in certain nutrients, like can we actually enhance primary productivity in the pond if we actually stock our pool ponds, these nursery ponds on the side. So with interns, and we added this sampling into our monthly water quality sampling. And so we sampled each of the pool ponds that were created. And this is also preliminary data, but we were able to show that these are the pool ponds, and compared to surrounding waters, chlorophyll A indeed increased. And so this is more to come because we're still collecting samples, but it's looking really great that actually what he was thinking is actually working. Okay, so this is final sweet and salty for everything that I talked about, not just those kia'i projects, but I think I'm going to start with salty so that we can end on a sweet note. But I think one of the main things about conducting work, and meaningful, intentional work within the community is that there's never enough time, right? There's not enough time to go to Laulima, not enough time to share everything, not enough time to be intentional. But I think like communicating, just being present when you can be, I think that's really, really important. So whatever time you can give, to try to do that always. And this is a really important lesson. If no can, no can. We move on, we do things, as a research coordinator, I have had to say that to actually interns and researchers. We just can't right now. And that is an important agency to give to people. To be able to say no is the biggest gift, right? Because that's really understanding the limits and the capacities of the whole partnership. Okay, and sweet. I think it's just the most rewarding work, right? It's like meaningful relationships, connections made. I mean, it's unlike any science or research that I was raised, within this this canon. And I think we are moving little steps forward with some of the things that we're trying to do with establishing the policies and trying to establish the protocols. So trying to move them forward to conduct ʻāina science in a different way. And then finally, thinking about positionality, and reciprocity. You give, and a lot of times you're like, you give so that, you'll receive back. But I actually like asked my mom this the other day, like something about giving. And then she, being this like old Asian lady, grandma, she's like, no, you don't give to receive. You just give. And I was like, actually, yeah, I've been saying it all wrong. You give because you give you with compassion and gratitude. So I think, I mean, that's, our model for 2026, how can we actually give without thinking about what we're going to get back? Okay, so mahalo for your time. I think we have time for some discussion. I was trying to get to that because I want to hear your voices. Here's our NER core team. We have coordinators, and here's our fearless leader in a soggy lobster costume in Wells, Maine.